Professional boxing attracts a rather specific type of character when it comes to those who make up the competitors within the sport. After all, it is an industry built upon beating the living hell out of your opponent until they are knocked unconscious. Whilst there is a degree of respect shown to anyone able to step into the ring and do battle, there are some boxers who, over the years, have become the subject of strong hatred from various fans. First up, Floyd "Money" Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather is one of the greatest boxers of all time for sure. Few would deny such a claim, but it's the fact that Mayweather is so very aware of this fact that makes him someone that a lot of people utterly despise. It's hard to tell sometimes where the character of Money Mayweather ends and where the man himself begins, and though it's likely that at least some of his antics are played up as part of a boxing persona who has become one of the biggest draws in the history of the sport, that hasn't changed the fact that his attitude tends to simply rub people the wrong way. Arrogance is a characteristic that people really dislike, and whether by design or through his personality actually being that way, Floyd Mayweather has managed to find uniquely ridiculous ways of demonstrating his ego over and over again. There's of course the multiple times that he has claimed to be bigger than the sport of boxing as a whole, which is a rather mystifying show of disrespect to the sport that afforded him his success in the first place. Then there's his claims that he is the greatest of all time, which as vague proclamations probably wouldn't be too heinous, but Mayweather making the specific claim to be better than Ali goes way beyond what many are willing to accept as mere self-belief. A slightly more arbitrary reason, though one that persists, is the fact that many fans over the years have voiced dissatisfaction with Mayweather's boxing style. He is a defensive specialist who plays it safe until seizing an opening, and often won many fights on points as opposed to knockout. This slower, methodical approach to the sport obviously works considering Mayweather's incredible record, and there's not really anything wrong with employing it, but many fans hate him because of it regardless. Another big reason why people dislike Mayweather is the money-obsessed image that he has created for himself, to the extent that even his iconic nickname revolves around dollar bills. He has famously made claims about how he is unwilling to consider fights that don't offer a significant payday, and it's this attitude toward the sport that has made him one of the richest athletes to ever live, and also one of the most hated boxers to step into the squared circle. Moving on, the Paul brothers. Does this count? I mean, I know that Jake and Logan Paul are primarily YouTubers masquerading as boxers, but hey, Jake at the very least has actually surprised some with a few decent wins, and both of them have competed in legitimate boxing contests, so that's got to count for something. There are a lot of factors behind the hate fans have for the Paul brothers, though the most obvious of them all obviously tie back to the pair's origin, as many boxing purists find the rise of YouTube boxing matches utterly horrific in the first place. Logan and Jake are two of the biggest names associated with this trend, so it's no surprise that someone who takes the art of boxing particularly seriously will find no shortage of bad things to say about the brothers. Jake Paul in particular is a target for a lot of criticism recently, as seems to be taking his foray into the squared circle far further than his brother, and for every victory he picks up, his doubters grow more frustrated. Seemingly, every time either of these two have a fight, there's a big discussion about what YouTube is doing to the boxing industry, and many would go as far as to accuse the Paul brothers of being part of a movement that is killing the sport as a whole. These issues aside, even those who have no problem with YouTubers getting involved in the boxing industry have reason to dislike the Paul brothers, as both are known for rather abrasive and cocky personas, and as we've seen with others on this list, whether it's a character or not, it can be reason enough for people to hate a boxer. Then of course, there's also those who still remember Logan Paul's string of controversies, with the most egregious of his offenses being when he filmed a YouTube video in the Aokigahara forest back in 2017. The forest was, and still is, a well-known site for suicides, and Paul's video included filming a dead body, an act of insensitivity that led to massive controversy and multiple sponsors dropping Paul. Though he has since apologized and cleaned up his act a lot, many still harbor feelings of anger about the whole affair, which is fair enough, really. A final thing the Pauls have against them is that whereas fighters like Mayweather or Tyson have earned respect as competitors from even their most diehard of haters, neither of the Pauls are really proven as elite boxers. Speaking of Mike Tyson, few can discredit Mike Tyson as being one of, if not the greatest of all time. Famously, when sat beside Muhammad Ali, both Ali and Tyson made the claim that the other was the greatest to ever do it in a boxing ring. And though there's obviously a level of courtesy and politeness playing a part there, the level of respect between the two greats supports Tyson's claim to GOAT status very well. Tyson really is one of the first names many think about when they think about the sport of boxing in general. Such is his undeniable influence on the industry. All of that being said, for all of his incredible accomplishments as a fighter, there is plenty of darkness that follows his career, with legal troubles and rampant controversy following him throughout his days as an active boxer. Though many views have softened on him due to his retirement, making it easier to simply look back at his legacy as an excellent fighter, there have been times when he was completely despised. One of the biggest black marks that hang over Tyson's name is, of course, when he was sentenced to prison for the rape of Desiree Washington in 1991. This fact alone is enough for many to despise Tyson, as they are unable to look past what is obviously a horrific crime. Tyson spent 3 years behind bars before being released on probation, and unfortunately, this would not be the last time that his name was associated with incredible controversy amongst boxing fans. In 1997, Tyson fought a rematch against Evander Holyfield in a bid to win back the world title, and by this point, many of you already know where this is going. After struggling in the earlier rounds of the fight, Tyson completely lost his cool and ended up biting Holyfield's ear so hard that he ripped out an entire chunk of it, which he proceeded to spit out onto the canvas. This utterly insane incident earned Tyson a $3 million fine and saw his boxing license revoked for over a year. In Tyson's own words, he felt that this incident made him the world's most hated man, with the reading of a contrived apology letter on his birthday not helping matters whatsoever. Since then, Tyson and Holyfield have made up and are actually rather close friends, but that doesn't change the fact that Tyson will go down to many people as their most hated boxer. And finally, Luis Resto. This list wouldn't be complete without mentioning Luis Resto, a man who pulled off one of the most infamous examples of cheating in the entire history of combat sports itself, not just the world of boxing. Resto isn't hated really for his personality or even for a constant string of offenses. Ultimately, the source of people's distaste for the man comes back to a single event on a single day in 1983, his fight with Billy Collins Jr. Initially, it was an unexpected shock of an outcome when Resto was declared the victor on that night. He was a solid but unspectacular journeyman who had just stopped one of boxing's best and brightest prospects, an undefeated star on the rise that many believed to be a future contender. All of that shock and confusion quickly turned into complete outrage as it became clear why Resto had won the bout. He'd removed the padding from his gloves, and he'd soaked his hand wraps in plaster, turning his fists into literal rocks. Not only was this an obvious and horrific example of cheating, but far worse than that is the lasting impact it left on Collins Jr. Collins suffered awful injuries as a result of his determination to win, meaning that even when taking bricks to the face, he lasted a surprising amount of time in the fight, leaving his face incredibly bruised and causing him permanent issues with his vision. As a result, he was forced to retire, falling into a depression and eventually dying in a car crash that many have linked to his deteriorating mental state. Resto and his trainer denied knowledge of what they'd done, an utterly ridiculous thing to do, and were promptly given prison sentences, with Resto only admitting to the crime in 2007. And that's everything. Which boxers do you hate? Is there anyone on this list who you think shouldn't be there? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, we'll see you soon.